Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are strapping in for a journey that's uh, less a straightforward musical biography. It may be more an exploration of human extremes.
Yeah,
We're talking
definitely.
about a man who ran from the Navy, helped save Motown records, invented a whole genre, and then, well, lost pretty much everything to addiction and violence.
Exactly. And if the name Rick James triggers one thing for most people today, it's probably Dave Chappelle in that wild wig yelling, "I'm Rick James, bitch!"
Right.
That 2004 sketch, it's hilarious, totally unforgettable. It brought his name roaring back into pop culture. But the real story of James Ambrose Johnson Jr. is, well, it's profoundly more chaotic
Yeah.
and ultimately much more tragic.
And that's really our mission today, isn't it? To get beyond the catchphrase, to try and understand the man he actually was. Rick James, the self-proclaimed super freak. I mean, a prodigious singer, songwriter, record producer. His life was this wild fusion of musical genius, what he brilliantly called punk funk, and just a frightening level of personal chaos and, frankly, excess.
Our source material today gives us a really comprehensive, pretty unvarnished look at his life.
Yeah.
His almost impossible early career playing with rock legends, his revolutionary sound, those intense personal struggles.
And that dramatic downfall that came before, maybe one of the most unexpected celebrity comebacks ever.
Absolutely. It's quite the arc.
So we're going to try and quickly but thoroughly unpack the sheer scale of this man's story. Get ready for some details on his early life as basically a fugitive.
Yeah.
His tumultuous relationship with the star of The Exorcist.
On the Blair. Yeah. That's a whole story in itself.
Even the surreal irony of him winning his only Grammy Award while he was actually incarcerated in one of California's toughest prisons. So let's get into this legend. Okay, so to really get the audacity, the chaos of Rick James, we kind of have to start right at the beginning. James Ambrose Johnson Jr., born in Buffalo, New York, 1948, one of 8 kids.
Right. And his early connection to music seems pretty conventional at first glance. Sang in the choir at St. Bridget's Catholic Church. Standard stuff.
But that conventionality, it didn't last long. His father, who worked in auto manufacturing, just walked out when James was about 10.
And that event just thrust his mother, Mabel, into this kind of high-stakes dual reality. It really shaped his whole outlook. You can see it later on.
What a life she had. Our sources describe her as someone living right on the edge. By day, she's a cleaner, just working hard to make ends meet for 8 children.
But she also had this fascinating creative past. She'd been a professional dancer for the legendary choreographer Katherine Dunham, so there was artistry there.
And then by night, she was something else entirely. A numbers runner for the Buffalo crime family.
Yeah, talk about pressure. That was her survival strategy, right? High risk, high reward. It must have taught James Jr. really early on that maybe rules are flexible sometimes, and that taking big risks is often necessary just to get by.
So it doesn't seem that surprising then that James quickly developed his own, let's say, high-stakes approach to life. By his mid-teens, the Army draft is looming. Vietnam era, and he makes this pivotal decision. Joins the U.S. Naval Reserve instead, thinking it's the safer bet.
A sensible choice on the surface, maybe. Except he almost immediately deserted the service, just poof, gone.
So by 1964, he's a fugitive, abandons his post in Brooklyn, flees north to Canada, Toronto.
And to dodge the military authorities, he immediately takes on a new name, Ricky James Matthews.
And this escape, this running, leads directly to one of the wildest How I Met stories in rock history.
It really does. Soon after he gets to Toronto, he's outside a club. Some drunk guys try to jump him.
Right.
And he gets saved by these 3 musicians. One of them happens to be Levon Helm.
Long Helm from the band.
Well, at that time, he was in Ronnie Hawkins' backing band, The Hawks, which became the band later. But yeah, Levon Helm.
Oh, incredible.
Helm sees something in James, this energy, invites him back to their show that night. James apparently had a guitar with him, ends up doing an impromptu set right there on stage.
So his unofficial debut happens basically because he needed protection from a street fight.
Pretty much. Classic Rick James entrance, in a way.
And that performance, it kicks off the formation of the Mina Birds, which this is the part of his early career that just makes your jaw drop.
Oh, yeah.
James is fronting this band, and they're mashing up soul, folk, rock. A mixed-race band, too, which was not the norm then at all.
And just look at who he pulled together. By 65, the lineup includes bassist Bruce Palmer.
Later of Buffalo Springfield.
Exactly. And, crucially, Neil Young joins on guitar, replacing someone else.
Neil Young.
Neil Young. This wasn't just some local garage band playing covers. This was a short-lived assembly of future icons, foundational members of Buffalo Springfield, Steppenwolf connections. It's nuts.
And this group, the Minor Birds, they actually get signed.
They did. Signed a recording deal with Motown Records in 1966. Motown saw their potential, this raw, contemporary sound. They invested in them.
But it all fell apart.
Completely. Motown's great missed opportunity. The contract just collapsed before they could release a single track. Why?
The military.
The military finally caught up with Ricky James Matthews. His fugitive status came out, contract halted immediately. Motown literally had Rick James, Neil Young, and Bruce Palmer under contract, and the Navy just stepped in and shut it down.
So he had to turn himself in. He was still just a teenager, right?
Yeah. Surrendered to the FBI, still only 18, sentenced by the Navy. But, even military prison couldn't really hold his chaos.
What happened?
He actually escaped from the Brooklyn Naval Brig after only 6 weeks. Spent another 6 months on the run again before surrendering. Eventually served time at Portsmouth Naval Prison.
It's just an unbelievable pattern of resisting authority.
Totally. But the sources point out something interesting. Prison wasn't just punishment, it was also a connection point. While he was locked up, he met Stevie Wonder.
Wait, Stevie Wonder visited him in prison?
Apparently so. And during one of their chats, Stevie told him the name Ricky James Matthews was, quote, too long.
No way.
Yeah, and suggested he shorten it to just Ricky James.
That's incredible irony. Stevie Wonder, the established Motown genius, unknowingly helps rename and sort of relaunch the career of the guy who would eventually help save the label.
And then later publicly blast Motown's biggest stars, including Stevie, implicitly, for being tokens. The layers there are just endless.
So after he gets out in 67, he goes back to Toronto for a bit. Then by 68, he's working for Motown again. Still under the radar.
Yeah, still using the Ricky Matthews name, strictly behind the scenes, though. Producing, writing for acts like the Miracles, the Spinners, Bobby Taylor, and the Vancouvers, learning the ropes.
But then he heads west.
Right. Having kind of conquered the military justice system,
Yeah.
he steps right into the absolute whirlwind of 1970s California rock and roll, moves to L.A., and the chaos there kind of dwarfed his earlier troubles.
He started hanging out with musicians in the Laurel Canyon scene, hooks up with Greg Reeves.
James really wanted to be the bassist for that new supergroup forming, Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, but it was Reeves who got the gig. Jones was on the sidelines again.
And the stories from that time are just wild and kind of terrifying.
Legendary, yeah. Like one of his first nights crashing on Stephen Stills' couch, he wakes up, finds Jim Morrison there.
The Jim Morrison.
High, bleeding from cutting his own wrists.
Hey.
Just there.
Jeez. Another night, after a show at the Whiskey A Go-Go, Morrison apparently tricks James into taking acid. Pretty forceful introduction to psychedelics.
Man. But the most chilling detail, the one that really gives you pause, involves the Sharon Tate murders.
Yeah, this one's heavy. James claimed he was invited to that party at Tate's house in '69 by his friend Jay Sebring, the hairstylist who was murdered that night.
But he didn't go.
He said he was too hungover, couldn't get out of bed.
Wow. So he narrowly avoided being present at one of the most infamous crimes of the century.
Just by chance.
Yeah.
When you connect all these dots, the desertion, the famous bandmates before they were famous, the brushes with death, the rock icon chaos, you realize he was seasoned in this incredibly volatile world very early on and had to shape his whole approach. It wasn't until 1976, really, that things started to solidify for his own breakthrough. He goes back to Buffalo.
Yep, forms the core of the Stone City Band.
Yeah.
And by 1977, he finally signs a proper solo contract with Motown's Gordy Records imprint, officially changes his stage name to Rick James.
The stage was finally set. The super freak was about to emerge.
Right, and this is where the Motown rebirth really kicks off. Rick James shows up at such a crucial time for the label.
Things were slowing down for them.
Yeah, by the late 70s, Motown's hit-making machine wasn't quite what it used to be. They were relying a lot on legacy acts, struggling to find sounds that could compete with disco, and especially those big funk bands like Parliament Funkadelic.
And James was the jolt they needed. His debut solo album, April '78, Come Get It, featuring the Stone City Band. It was immediate, a massive success. Raw, aggressive, it sounded completely new.
That album was a lifesaver for Motown, commercially and critically. It gave them You and I, his first #1 R&B hit, and of course the infamous single Mary Jane.
Which we'll get back to.
Oh, yes. The album sold 1 million copies. It proved Motown could still sign and break new, relevant artists who weren't just doing disco.
He kept that pace up, didn't he? Busting out of L7, fired it up, both in 79.
Relentless. And that Fired Up tour, that's a piece of music history right there. Shows his eye for talent. He invited 2 opening acts, both kind of up and coming at the time.
Who were they?
Prince and Tina Marie.
Get out. Prince and Tina Marie opening for Rick James.
Can you imagine that triple bill today? It basically defines a whole decade of music. Just incredible foresight.
But the real peak, the defining moment, came in 81 with Street Songs.
Oh, absolutely. That album was a phenomenon. Sold over 4 million copies worldwide, #1 R&B, #3 on the pop charts. And it defined his signature sound, punk funk.
Okay, let's bring that down musically. What was punk funk exactly? What made it different?
Well, it was this fusion, right? Engineered for maximum impact. It deliberately grabbed aggressive elements from rock music, specifically distorted guitar riffs, kind of loud and in your face. And it blended those with the really high-energy rhythms of funk. But unlike a lot of the smooth, polished R&B or even the orchestrated disco sound, punk funk was raw. Built on these heavy, driving bass lines, very influenced by P-Funk, George Clinton.
Often played by James himself, right? He was a great bassist.
Fantastic bassist. So you had that gritty, deep bass overlaid with new wave synthesizers, which were becoming big then, and his powerful, sometimes screaming vocals. It was really the opposite of smooth.
Yeah, you can hear that. Street Songs gave us the big ones. Give It To Me, Baby.
Massive hit.
And his biggest crossover hit, Super Freak. Peaked at #16 on the main Billboard Hot 100 chart. That proved he could cross genre lines, racial lines on the radio.
Definitely. But what's key is his versatility, too. He wasn't just the punk-funk wild man. He could deliver these incredible, soulful ballads.
Like Fire and Desire.
Oh, that duet with Tina Marie. Just stunning. Their chemistry was so strong, a lot of fans actually thought they were a couple.
Right. And he did Ebony Eyes in 83 with Smokey Robinson, a Motown legend. So he could still command that classic Motown soul intensity when he wanted to.
Exactly. And like Prince, who he toured with, James had ambitions beyond just his own records. He wanted to be a star maker, launch other acts that he produced.
Like the Mary Jane Girls.
Yep. Featuring JoJo McDuffie on lead vocals. He produced their big hits all night long, Candyman. Big successes.
His production touch was kind of everywhere for a while there. Yeah. In 82, he produced the Temptations' big comeback hit.
Standing on the top, got them back in the R&B top 10. And what's fascinating is he puts his signature shout right in the track. Temptations, S-Sing.
He used that on Super Freak, too.
And on a Tina Marie track, it was like his producer tag, almost signing his work right there in the mix.
And then, maybe his biggest outside production hit. 1985, Eddie Murphy.
Party All the Time, written and produced by Rick James. Huge hit for the comedian. James was just dominating the charts, both for himself and others.
But this huge star status, it was always running parallel to this controversial public image. He was famous, or maybe infamous, for promoting marijuana use live on stage.
Oh, yeah. Even when that put him in serious legal jeopardy sometimes. Motown executives, incredibly, apparently thought Mary Jane was just a sweet love song at first. Completely missed the obvious cannabis reference.
How did they miss that?
You tell me. Maybe wishful thinking. But the real friction, the big clash, came with MTV.
Right. MTV launches in 81, becomes the absolute gatekeeper for pop music for image.
And James submits the video for Super Freak, which is one of the biggest songs in the country, and MTV rejects it. Flat out.
What was their reasoning?
They cited vulgarity, said the video was too explicit, too suggestive.
But James didn't buy that.
Not for a second. He immediately, very publicly accused the network of racism, pointed out the massive underrepresentation of black artists on the channel, despite his own crossover success, said they just didn't want his kind of black artist.
This leads to a really infamous moment, doesn't it? When Michael Jackson and Prince do break through on MTV.
He doubles down hard, goes on this angry, widely reported rant in 1983, calls Michael Jackson and Prince tokens.
Wow.
Yeah. Basically suggesting they'd sanitize their image, sold out, to appeal to a white mainstream audience that MTV was comfortable with. He demanded that all black artists pull their videos from MTV in protest.
That is an incredibly aggressive move, using his clout to try and force a cultural shift. But wasn't there a contradiction? I mean, he's accusing them of rejecting him for race, but his videos were pretty sexually explicit and his music used explicit language. Wasn't he maybe giving them an easy out?
That's the paradox of Rick James, isn't it? He always operated at the extremes. He wanted that mainstream acceptance, but completely on his own terms. And his turns involved pushing every single boundary, musically, lyrically, visually. His complaint about MTV wasn't totally dismissed, though. David Bowie famously later confronted an MTV VJ in an interview, asking why they weren't playing more black artists, so the pressure was building.
Did James ever get played on MTV?
Eventually, yeah. But ironically, it was with the Eddie Murphy video Party All the Time, which was arguably a bit more palatable for the network's audience at the time.
So amidst all this career explosion, the fame, the controversy, his personal life was just as intense. He starts dating actress Linda Blair.
Yeah, Linda Blair, star of The Exorcist. They dated from about 1982 to 1984.
How did they even meet? Seems like an unlikely pairing.
Apparently, she called him sexy in an interview somewhere. He heard about it, tracked her down, contacted her. That's the story, anyway. Their relationship was intense, and it directly inspired one of his big hits.
Cold-blooded.
That's the one. James wrote it about Blair because, as he put it, she could freeze my blood.
Wow.
But there's a really painful detail James shared later in his memoir about why things ended and the impact it had.
What was that?
He wrote that Blair got pregnant early in their relationship, and she chose to have an abortion, apparently without really consulting him. He wrote about looking back on that choice with just profound sadness, wondering if having that child might have completely changed his path, maybe pulled him back from the self-destruction that was coming.
That's heavy. It really feels like even at his absolute peak of fame and success, the seeds of his downfall were already being sown.
Yeah, the trajectory was already starting to curve downwards, even if it wasn't obvious from the outside just yet. And by the late 80s, that curve gets steep, fast. The sheer speed and scale of this super freak lifestyle it wasn't sustainable. We're moving into the really tragic period of decline now, starting around 89, 90.
He lost his record deal.
Yeah, lost his deal with Reprise Warner Bros. And the true scale of his addiction just became devastatingly clear.
The source material is incredibly blunt about this. He admitted himself.
Yeah.
What was the figure?
He admitted that for 5 years straight, he was spending about $7,000 a week on crack cocaine.
$7,000.
A week.
For 5 years.
Yeah. I mean, just do the math. It's staggering. His drug use had started way back, marijuana, some heroin in his teens, but it escalated into this daily, crippling addiction to crack.
And the physical damage must have been immense.
Oh, severe. By 1984, remember, he'd already been hospitalized after being found unconscious at home. The toll was adding up. But what makes this period just so utterly surreal is that right in the middle of this intense personal spiral, when his career is stalling and his life is literally falling apart from drugs, he gets his only major industry award.
This is the you can't touch this moment, the ultimate irony.
It's almost unbelievable. So 1990, MC Hammer drops You Can't Touch This. Samples that iconic bass riff from Super Freak.
Instantly recognizable. The song blows up. It's everywhere.
One of the biggest pop hits of the entire decade. Rick James, along with his original co-writer Alonzo Miller, they immediately sued Hammer for songwriting credit.
And they got it.
They won.
Yeah.
And as a result, in 1991, Rick James receives his only Grammy Award. Best R&B song for composing You Can't Touch This.
So he wins a Grammy for writing a song based on his own earlier song.
At the exact moment, his life is collapsing due to crack cocaine addiction, and he's about to face major legal disaster. It just perfectly crystallizes the whole paradox of his life. Genius and disaster, hand in hand.
And that disaster became total. His addiction led directly to these convictions for 2 separate, extremely serious, violent incidents. Kidnapping and assault.
Yeah, these are grim. We need to be clear about the details reported in the sources because they explain the complete derailment of his career and public image.
The first incident was August 1991 in Los Angeles.
Right. James was arrested with his girlfriend at the time, Tanya Hijazi. They were accused of holding a 24-year-old woman named Frances Alley hostage for up to 6 days.
Hostage?
Yeah. The sources state that under the influence of crack cocaine, during a week-long binge, they tied her up, forced her to perform sexual acts, and burned her legs and abdomen with the hot end of a crack pipe.
Oh my God, that's horrific.
Just horrific. The charges were extensive, aggravated mayhem, torture, kidnapping, really serious stuff.
And then, while he was out on bail for that.
Unbelievably, yes. November 1992, while awaiting trial, he commits a second similar violent act.
What happened then?
He assaulted a music executive named Mary Sager, again while intoxicated. This happened over a 20-hour period at a hotel in West Hollywood. Sagar testified she met James and Hijazi for what she thought was a business meeting and ended up being kidnapped and beaten.
So the trial, what was the outcome?
The verdict was pretty clear-cut. James was found guilty of kidnapping and assault in both cases. Crucially, though, he was cleared of the torture charge in that first incident.
That was significant, wasn't it?
Hugely significant. It probably saved him from a potential life sentence. As it was, he was sentenced to 3 years to be served at Folsom State Prison.
Folsom, wow.
Yeah. And the legal fallout didn't stop there. While James was locked up, Mary Sagar won a major civil lawsuit against him.
The second victim.
Right. In 1994, she was awarded nearly $2 million in damages. And James himself was ordered to pay about $1 million of that personally, a massive financial hit that would hang over him for the rest of his life.
This really represents the absolute bottom, doesn't it? The complete fall from grace for this Motown savior, this crossover star. Prison.
Total rock bottom. He was eventually paroled in August 1996 after serving more than 2 years.
What's interesting, though, or maybe just complicated, is his relationship with Tanya Hijazi, the woman arrested with him in the first incident.
Yeah, that connection persisted through the crisis. They actually had a son together, Tasman, born in 1993, while they were both dealing with the legal system, potentially both incarcerated at points.
And they got married.
They did. In 1996, shortly after they were both released, stayed married until 2002 when they divorced. So even in the midst of that utter chaos, that relationship endured for a while.
So James gets out of Folsom in 96. What happens next as he try to come back?
He does, almost immediately. In 1997, he releases a new album, Urban Rhapsody, tries to get back out on the road, touring again.
He even did that VH1 Behind the Music episode around then, didn't he, in 98?
Yeah, that was a big deal. Gave people a glimpse into his life after Motown, after prison, trying to frame his narrative again.
But his health, those years of hard living, the addiction, it must have taken a serious toll.
A massive toll. We know that earlier in 98, before the Behind the Music aired even, he'd had hip replacement surgery.
Why?
Severe bone damage. The sources attribute it to a combination of long-term substance use and just years of his high-energy stage performances jumping around. It literally wore his body down.
And then came the stroke.
Yeah, later that same year, in 1998. During a concert in Denver, he suffered a mild stroke. A blood vessel ruptured in his neck. That was really the thing that forced him to finally step back. He announced a semi-retirement after that.
The man who lives life at 100 miles an hour was now essentially physically broken.
Pretty much. And the stage was set really for maybe the most bizarre, unexpected career revival in modern pop culture history.
Because James had been out of the mainstream spotlight for years at this point. Semi-retired, dealing with all these chronic health problems.
And then, bam, early 2004. Everything changes overnight. Chappelle's show. The Charlie Murphy's True Hollywood Stories sketch. It just exploded. It instantly transformed Rick James's image, his entire legacy for a whole new generation who maybe only vaguely knew Super Freak.
Those sketches were everywhere. Charlie Murphy recounting these hilarious, often just completely unbelievable stories about hanging out with Rick James in the 80s.
And Dave Chappelle's portrayal, unforgettable. He gave us those two catchphrases that just define Rick James for millions. I'm Rick James, bitch.
Yep.
And that simple, chillingly funny explanation for all the madness. Cocaine is a hell of a drug.
The impact was huge, wasn't it? Suddenly everyone was talking about Rick James again.
Massive and immediate. And James, to his credit, capitalized on it. He hit the road again. He joined Tina Marie on her La Donna tour in May 2004, performing live again with his longtime friend and collaborator.
And his final public performance. It was a kind of a perfect bookend, wasn't it? Back with his Motown roots, in a way.
It really was. June 29, 2004, at the BET Awards, he performed Fire and Desire live with Tina Marie.
Wow.
And apparently, even backstage, he was leaning into this new Chappelle-fueled persona. There's a story he called out some young woman who didn't recognize him, saying something like, "Never mind who you thought I was, I'm Rick James, bitch."
Embracing the caricature.
Totally. But that resurgence, that final lap, it was tragically short-lived.
He died just over a month after that BT performance. August 6th, 2004. Only 56 years old. Found in his home in L.A.
Yeah. The official cause of death was listed as pulmonary failure and cardiac failure, associated with a whole laundry list of pre-existing conditions. Diabetes, the stroke he'd had, heart problems that required a pacemaker, a previous heart attack. His body was just worn out.
But the toxicology report, that's a key detail for understanding his final state, right?
Absolutely crucial. The autopsy found a cocktail, a whole mix of 9 different drugs in his system.
9? Like what?
Things like Xanax, Valium, cocaine, methamphetamine, hydrocodone. A bit of everything, seemingly.
So he overdosed.
See, that's the critical point the coroner made. Despite that list of drugs, the report explicitly stated that none of the drugs or drug combinations were found to be at levels that were life-threatening in and of themselves.
So he didn't die from an overdose, technically.
Correct. He died from the accumulated damage, the ruin caused by years and years of chronic substance abuse and health neglect. His system just gave out under the weight of it all.
After his death, there was a big public funeral back in Buffalo, right?
Yeah, huge outpouring. An estimated 6,000 fans attended. His ashes were later buried there at Forest Lawn Cemetery. A return home in the end.
And his legacy, it continues to evolve even after his death. His autobiography finally got published properly.
Yeah, an edited version called Glow. The autobiography of Rick James came out in 2014, gives his perspective, though obviously filtered.
And his music is still valuable. That catalog sale.
Right. In 2020, his estate sold a 50% stake in his publishing rights and master recordings to the Hypnosis Songs Fund. Shows the enduring commercial power of those hits.
And culturally, people are still fascinated. That documentary...
The 2021 documentary, Bitchin', The Sound and Fury of Rick James, critically acclaimed, got 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, really reinforced his musical genius and the complexity of his life.
And now there's even a stage musical touring.
Yep, super freak. A Rick James story premiered in 2024. Shows that interest in his story, his sound, it's still very much alive. #tag outro.
So where does that leave us? What does it all mean? We've traced this life just defined by staggering extreme.
Right?
From James Ambrose Johnson Jr., the kid running from the Navy, playing in a band with Neil Young before anyone knew who they were.
To Rick James, the Motown savior, the absolute pioneer of punk funk, a sound that changed music.
And then the slide. The deep dive into addiction, the horrifying convictions for kidnapping and assault, only to be followed by that completely surreal Grammy win for a song he didn't even sing, based on his own hit.
The story of Rick James is just this painful synthesis, isn't it? The musical genius who really did revolutionize funk and R&B, and the deeply, deeply troubled man whose, $7,000 a week crack habit led directly to horrific violence in prison.
He was this force of nature, a brilliant producer who arguably helped save Motown's fortunes in the late 70s.
Yeah.
And also a man who just self-destructed so publicly, so completely.
Yeah, and that complex relationship he had with mainstream success, it's perfectly captured by that single Grammy Award, isn't it?
How so?
Well, he gets it for composing the source material for Hammer's sample, a victory that comes while he's at his absolute lowest point, personally and legally. It just highlights how difficult it was for him to get that kind of uncontroversial acclaim purely on his own terms, for his own direct work during his peak.
And now, the modern generation, they know him mostly through that Chappelle Show caricature.
Exactly. A caricature that brilliantly distilled his fury, his audacity, his over-the-top lifestyle into those two perfect punchlines.
That comedy sketch gave him this unexpected final act, this resurgence. But it also massively simplified a life that was just incredibly rich with musical innovation, but also defined by profound, costly human tragedy.
Absolutely.
So I guess this raises a pretty big question for you, the listener, to think about. Knowing the full scope now, the runaway sailor, the genius architect of punk funk, the violent addict, the musical revolutionary who collaborated with legends, can that I'm Rick James bitch legacy, as funny and memorable as it is, truly ever capture the full picture, the sound of the fury? Or will the sheer unbelievable audacity of his actual life always make the man himself somehow more compelling, maybe even more tragic than the incredible music he created?